Hotels are meant to be places of rest, a temporary home away from home. But sometimes, some hotels hold secrets. Secrets they don't want you to know. This is the story of the Forgotten Floor, a hotel where some guests check in, but never check out. I was traveling for work, exhausted from back-to-back meetings, when I checked into the Grand Haven Hotel. It was one of those old buildings with a grand lobby, chandeliers that flickered slightly, and velvet carpets that muffled every footstep. "One night, please," I told the receptionist. She smiled, a little too widely, and handed me a key. A real metal key, not a key card. Strange. "You're in room 803, sir. Elevators are just down the hall." I nodded, grabbed my suitcase, and made my way toward the elevator. As I stepped in, something odd caught my eye. The buttons. They went up to 7. Number 8, number 803. Confused, I turned back, but the receptionist was gone. Only an empty counter remained. I shook my head. Maybe I was more tired than I thought. Pressing the button for the 7th floor, I leaned against the cold steel walls. The elevator groaned as it ascended, but then, just before reaching the 7th floor, it shuddered. Then, without warning, the 8 lit up. The doors slid open. A hallway stretched out before me, dark, silent, and unsettlingly cold. My breath misted in the air. This wasn't right. Something about this floor felt wrong. The wallpaper was peeling, the lights flickered, and a musty, decayed smell lingered in the air. I pulled out my key and found room 803, the brass numbers dull and tarnished. When I turned the key, the door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room. The furniture was old-fashioned, as if it hadn't been changed in decades. A rotary phone sat on the bedside table. The bedspread had a floral pattern, faded with age. As I placed my suitcase down, I noticed something that sent a chill down my spine. The mirror above the dresser. It reflected the room, but not me. I blinked. Surely, I was just imagining things. Maybe the angle was weird. I stepped closer. Still, no reflection. A cold dread crept up my spine. That's when the phone rang. The sound was jarring, an old rotary phone ringing with an unnatural sharpness. Hesitantly, I picked it up. "You shouldn't be here." The whisper on the other end sent a shiver through my entire body. "Who is this?" I demanded. A moment of silence. Then, "Leave. Now. Before it finds you." Click. The line went dead. I turned back toward the mirror, my breath shallow. That's when I saw it. The closet door was slightly open. I hadn't opened it. I swallowed hard and stepped toward it. As I reached out, a hand shot out from the darkness inside. Long, pale fingers, inhumanly thin, gripped the edge of the door. I stumbled backward, my pulse hammering. The fingers curled, gripping the wood tightly. Then, the door creaked open further. I didn't wait to see what was inside. I bolted. Rushing out into the hallway, I slammed the door behind me. But the hallway was no longer the same. The walls had changed. The wallpaper was darker, rotting, with deep scratch marks running along its length. I ran for the elevator, but when I reached it, there were no buttons. Just a blank panel. Then, from behind me, footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Getting closer. I turned. At the far end of the hallway, a figure stood. Tall. Shadowed. Its face obscured, but its eyes, black, empty voids, locked onto mine. I pounded on the elevator door. Come on, come on. The figure started running. The lights flickered. And then, the doors slammed open. I threw myself inside, frantically pressing the L button. The creature lunged, its fingers nearly brushing my face. The doors snapped shut. The elevator dropped. I felt weightless as it plummeted, the air rushing past me. My ears rang. My vision blurred. Then, silence. A soft ding. The doors slid open to the lobby. The receptionist stood there, smiling. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked, as if nothing had happened. I stumbled out, looking around. The hotel was normal. No rotting walls. No flickering lights. No eerie silence. I turned back to the receptionist. "The 8th floor," I whispered. "What's wrong with it?" She frowned. "Sir, this hotel only has 7 floors." I didn't argue. I grabbed my suitcase and left. As I walked down the street, I glanced back one last time. The hotel stood tall, its windows reflecting the city lights. Then, I saw it. A single window, on the 8th floor, where there shouldn't be one. And in it, a shadowy figure watching me. Its black eyes never blinking. I never spoke of that night again. But sometimes, when I stay at hotels, I always make sure to check the elevator buttons. Because you never know. Some hotels have floors they don't want you to find.
It was a rainy evening when I arrived at the Hallowbrook Inn, a small, isolated hotel tucked away in the woods. The journey had been long, and the GPS had failed me twice. The hotel had an old-world charm, a large stone fireplace crackling in the lobby, and worn, but comfortable chairs scattered around. The receptionist, a woman with graying hair and a somber expression, greeted me. "Welcome," she said. "We don't get many visitors this time of year. The weather keeps most people away." I nodded and smiled, eager to get to my room. She handed me a key without asking any questions, just a simple brass key. "Room 305, she said softly, then added, "The room is quite special, sir. Some say it has a history." "History?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She didn't respond, only nodded and gestured toward the hall. The hallway was dim, the carpet worn thin underfoot, and the walls lined with paintings of people I didn't recognize. As I approached room 305, a chill ran down my spine. The door was ajar, but there was no sign of anyone inside. I pushed the door open and stepped in. The room was small, but cozy. A 4-poster bed with a heavy velvet blanket. A dresser. A large mirror across the wall. Everything seemed perfect, except for the faint smell. It was a mix of something floral, but decayed. As if the room hadn't been aired out in years. I shrugged it off, unpacked my things, and settled into the bed. It had been a long day, and I quickly drifted off to sleep. I woke up to the sound of knocking. A soft, hollow sound at first. Knock. 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 I turned over in bed, groggy, but when I looked at the clock, it was 12:01 a.m. I froze. Who would be knocking on my door at this hour? I walked to the door slowly and, when I looked through the peephole, there was nothing. But I heard breathing. Soft, shallow breaths on the other side. I opened the door cautiously. Empty. There was no one there. Not a single soul in the hall. Puzzled and unnerved, I stepped back into the room, locking the door behind me. But then I noticed something, the mirror. It had changed. The reflection in the mirror was not mine. It was someone else. A figure standing by the bed, staring at me with hollow, lifeless eyes. I turned quickly. The room was empty. The bed was undisturbed. But the reflection, it stared back at me. I sat back down, my heart racing. The cold chill in the air seemed to grow. The reflection in the mirror smiled, a thin, twisted smile that I would never forget. I backed away, feeling the walls close in on me. But then I heard a whisper. "Leave, before midnight." I spun around, but the room was silent. The whisper had come from inside the mirror. I rushed to the front desk, desperate for answers. The receptionist was still there, her hands folded calmly in front of her. She didn't even look up when I approached. "Room 305, I said, my voice trembling. "What's going on? Who was that in the mirror?" She slowly raised her eyes to meet mine. "Room 305, she repeated softly. "It's not meant for the living. Not anymore." She paused, and I could hear the sound of her breath catching. "You should leave. Now." I rushed back to the room, packing my belongings as fast as I could. But when I turned to leave, the door was locked. No matter how hard I turned the handle, it wouldn't budge. Panic set in. I was trapped. The knocking started again. Louder this time. Knock. 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 The walls around me began to warp and crack. A low hum filled the air, vibrating my very bones. I heard a voice behind me, cold and familiar. "You shouldn't have stayed. You shouldn't have come back." I spun around, and there it was again, the figure in the mirror. It had stepped out from the reflection and was now standing in the middle of the room. It had a face, but it was hollow. The skin was stretched too tight. Its eyes were voids, black and endless. It reached out toward me with long, bony fingers. "It's your turn now." I stumbled backward, my heart thudding in my chest. But then, silence. The figure was gone. The door opened easily now. I didn't question it. I ran down the stairs and burst through the lobby doors. I didn't stop until I was outside, gasping for air in the cool night. As I looked back at the Hallowbrook Inn, the windows were dark, and the front door was closed. But I could see a figure standing in the upper window of room 305. The same hollow eyes. I didn't look back again. I walked away as fast as I could, not daring to turn around. I never went back to that hotel, and I never told anyone what happened that night. But sometimes, when I pass by a lonely stretch of road, I'll see the Hallowbrook Inn in the distance, standing empty, as if waiting for someone else to check in. And I wonder, what happened to the other guest who stayed in room 305?